The coffee maker gurgled at 2 in the morning, which meant Nessa was having another one of her important work calls. I sat in my home office, staring at the glow of 3 monitors displaying code that needed debugging, listening to her voice drift down the hallway like smoke from a house fire. "I love you too, babe," she whispered into her phone. No, he's completely clueless, always buried in his computers. My fingers froze over the keyboard. The IT consulting business had taught me to pay attention to details, to notice when systems weren't running as they should. Tonight, my marriage was throwing error messages. I saved my work and crept toward our bedroom. Nessa stood by the window in her silk nightgown, phone pressed against her ear, completely absorbed in her conversation. She looked beautiful in the moonlight, which made what I was hearing even more twisted. "Tomorrow night works perfectly," she continued. "Tanner has that client meeting in Boston. We'll have the whole evening." The floorboard creaked under my weight. Nessa spun around, eyes wide with panic. "I have to go," she said quickly, ending the call. "Tanner, you scared me. Why are you awake?" "Code review deadline," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Who was that?" "Just Tiffany from work. We're planning the Henderson campaign launch." She slipped back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. "You know how she gets when she's stressed." Tiffany. Right. Tiffany, who lived in California and wouldn't be making work calls at 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Tiffany, who had a voice 3 octaves higher than the male voice I'd heard responding in the background. I returned to my office, but instead of debugging code, I started debugging my life. The signs had been there for months. Late meetings that never appeared on her work calendar. New lingerie that never made appearances for me. Gym sessions that left her smelling like cologne instead of sweat. When Nessa's breathing settled into sleep rhythms, I retrieved her phone from the nightstand. She'd always been careless with passwords, using our anniversary date for everything. The screen unlocked on the first try. The text thread with Brady made my stomach drop through the floor. Brady, my younger brother Brady, golden boy Brady, who'd always gotten everything he wanted, including, apparently, my fiancée. The messages painted a picture that would have made a romance novelist blush. Photos, plans, intimate details about their encounters. Nessa had been documenting their affair like a teenager with her first crush. The timestamps showed they'd been meeting for 3 months, often in our house while I worked late. One photo showed Nessa in our bed, wearing nothing but a smile. In the background, I could see Brady's distinctive Celtic knot tattoo on his shoulder, the same tattoo I'd been with him to get when he turned 21. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of betrayal. They'd been planning this conversation tonight, preparing for some big announcement. The messages mentioned something about telling Tanner tomorrow and making sure he'll still pay for everything. I took screenshots of everything, uploaded them to a secure cloud account, and placed her phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat in my office chair, staring at the evidence of my destroyed life, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. The next morning arrived with the smell of bacon and the sound of Nessa humming in the kitchen. She'd made my favorite breakfast, which immediately put me on high alert. Nessa only cooked when she wanted something. "Good morning, honey," she said brightly, kissing my cheek as I sat down. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," I lied, accepting the coffee she offered. "You seem cheerful today. I have some exciting news." She sat across from me, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Tanner, I'm pregnant." I took a sip of coffee, buying time to arrange my expression into something resembling surprise. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" "Completely sure. I took 3 tests." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're going to be parents." The timing was perfect. According to her text messages, she'd been with Brady just 2 weeks ago, complaining about missing her period. Simple math told me everything I needed to know about paternity. "That's wonderful news," I said carefully. "We should schedule a doctor's appointment. get a proper test done, and probably start thinking about a paternity test, just for the medical records. Her smile flickered. A paternity test? Tanner, why would we need that? Standard procedure these days. Helps with genetic screening, family medical history, that sort of thing. I kept my voice casual, professional. My insurance covers it. Nessa's face went through several expressions before settling on something resembling guilt. She withdrew her hand from mine and stared at her plate. Actually, she said quietly, there's something else we need to discuss. I'm listening. The baby might not be yours. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. Might not be mine. I made a mistake, Tanner. A terrible mistake. It was Brady. The admission hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I waited for her to continue, watching her fidget with her engagement ring. It just happened, she said quickly. We were both drunk after that barbecue at your parents' house, and one thing led to another, and how many times? What? How many times did it just happen? Her silence answered my question. I see. I stood up, walked to the kitchen window, and looked out at our perfectly manicured backyard. So, what exactly are you proposing here, Nessa? I want us to work through this. The baby needs a stable home, and you've always been more responsible than Brady, more financially stable. I turned to face her. You want me to raise my brother's child? I want us to be a family. This doesn't have to change anything between us. Doesn't have to change anything. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My fiancée is pregnant with my brother's baby, and you think nothing has to change. Nessa stood up, moving into what I recognized as her professional presentation mode. She'd perfected this stance during her years in public relations, projecting confidence even when selling complete nonsense. I've thought this through, Tanner. I've prepared a budget. She pulled a folder from the kitchen counter and spread papers across the table. The mortgage, my student loans, the car payments, medical expenses for the pregnancy. You'll continue covering everything as planned. I stared at the papers. She'd actually itemized the cost of her betrayal, presented it like a business proposal. You've got this all figured out, I said. I'm trying to be practical. Brady isn't in a position to take on this kind of responsibility. He's still getting his personal training business off the ground. And if I refuse? Her expression hardened. Then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are, how you abandoned your pregnant fiancée, how you refused to support your own child. Your own child, even though you just admitted it's Brady's. Details, Tanner. People will believe what I tell them. I'm very good at managing narratives. She was threatening me. Actually threatening me with a smear campaign to force me into subsidizing her affair. The audacity was breathtaking. I'll need copies of all the loan documents, I said finally, and the house deed. If I'm going to be responsible for everything, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Relief flooded her face. Of course, I'll get everything together. I'll also need access to your medical records, insurance information, the whole package. Absolutely. Thank you, Tanner. I know this isn't easy, but you're doing the right thing. The right thing. She actually believed she was the victim in this scenario. An hour later, I had copies of every financial document in our shared life. Nessa had been thorough, highlighting exactly which debts she expected me to cover. What she hadn't realized was that she'd just handed me the blueprints to her financial destruction. I left the house without another word, driving to my favorite cafe downtown. The grind was always busy on Saturday mornings, filled with locals catching up on gossip and freelancers camping out with laptops. I found a corner table and ordered a large coffee, then opened my laptop and got to work. The first step was simple: remove myself from every financial obligation I could legally escape. Nessa had been sloppy with the paperwork over the years, assuming I'd always be there to cover her mistakes. 3 personal loans had my signature as guarantor. but the primary borrower was listed as Nessa alone. A few clicks and phone calls later, I'd filed official withdrawal notices with all three lenders. Next came the bank accounts. We'd maintained separate checking accounts but shared savings and credit cards. I transferred my contributions to the shared savings back to my personal account, leaving exactly what Nessa had deposited. I removed myself as an authorized user on her credit cards and changed the beneficiary information on all my accounts. The house was trickier, but not impossible. We'd bought it together, but I'd made the down payment and handled all the mortgage paperwork. A careful review of the deed revealed something Nessa had forgotten. I'd included a sole ownership clause that activated if she defaulted on her portion of the financial obligations. Since she'd never actually contributed to the mortgage payments, technically she'd been in default for 2 years. I activated the real estate listing I'd prepared months earlier, back when I'd first started suspecting her affair. The photos were already taken, the description written, the price set to move quickly. One email to our realtor, and the house would be on the market by Monday morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Nessa. "How's your day going? Can't wait to start planning our future together." I typed back, "Just taking care of some financial housekeeping. See you tonight." The certified letters went out that afternoon. 3 loan companies received official notice that I was withdrawing my guarantee, effective immediately. Each letter included copies of the original loan documents and proof of my legal right to withdraw. By Monday morning, Nessa would be solely responsible for over $60,000 in debt. The escrow company received the house listing agreement and instructions to proceed with all showings. I'd included a note authorizing them to change the locks and provide new keys to the listing agent. My phone rang as I was sealing the last envelope. "Tanner?" It was my sister Martha, calling from her law office in Boston. "I got your message. Are you sure about this?" "Completely sure." "And you have documentation of everything?" "Screenshots, recordings, financial records, the works." "Good. Don't delete anything, and don't confront them directly until the paperwork is filed. You want this to be clean and legal." "What about the house?" "If the deed is structured the way you described, you're within your rights. Just make sure you follow proper notification procedures." "Already handled." "Tanner, I have to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this might get?" I thought about Nessa's threat that morning, her casual assumption that I'd bankroll her betrayal. "I'm counting on it getting ugly, Martha. That's when people show their true colors." Sunday evening, I returned home to find Nessa in the living room, surrounded by baby name books and pregnancy magazines. She'd spent the day planning our fictional future, while I'd spent it dismantling her financial security. "How was your day?" she asked, looking up from a magazine article about nursery themes. "Productive. I took care of those financial documents you mentioned." "Perfect. I've been thinking about names. What do you think about Michael for a boy?" "Michael. My father's name. She wanted to name my brother's child after my father." "We'll see," I said. "I'm going to grab a shower." In the bathroom, I checked my secure email account. The first confirmation had already arrived. Loan company number 1 had processed my withdrawal and updated their records. Nessa's first payment was due in 10 days, and without my guarantee, they'd be watching her account closely. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife and brother, last night. Your car." The attached photo showed Nessa and Brady in a passionate embrace against my Honda Civic, taken in the parking lot of the Riverside Motel. The timestamp showed yesterday evening, while I'd been debugging code and she'd been supposedly working late. I texted back, "Who is this?" "Mrs. Hargrove from next door, thought you should know." Mrs. Hargrove was 78 years old and had been watching our neighborhood like a hawk for the past 20 years. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge, and apparently she'd been documenting Nessa's activities. "Do you have other photos?" I typed. "Plenty. Been going on for months. That girl's been making a fool of you." I stared at the photo, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Tomorrow, Nessa's world would start crumbling. Her loans would go into default, the house would hit the market, and her financial safety net would disappear, but that was just the beginning. I smiled as I deleted the photo and started planning phase 2. Monday morning arrived with the sound of Nessa's phone ringing incessantly. She stumbled out of bed, confused and irritated, answering on the 4th call. "Hello? Yes, this is Nessa Jossman." Her voice shifted from sleepy to alert in seconds. "What do you mean my loan is in default?" I pretended to be asleep, listening as she paced the bedroom floor. "That's impossible. My fiancé is the guarantor. There must be some mistake." A long pause. "What do you mean he withdrew his guarantee? When did this happen?" The conversation continued for 10 minutes, growing more heated as Nessa realized the scope of her situation. 3 phone calls later, she had the full picture. $63,000 in personal debt, now entirely her responsibility, with payments due within the week. "Tanner." She shook my shoulder roughly. "Tanner, wake up, we have a problem." I opened my eyes and stretched, feigning confusion. "What's wrong?" "The loan companies are saying you withdrew your guarantees. That can't be right." "Actually, it is right." I sat up, meeting her stare directly. "I filed the withdrawal notices on Saturday." Her face cycled through disbelief, anger, and panic. "You can't do that. We had an agreement. We had an agreement before you got pregnant with my brother's baby. That agreement is now void. Tanner, be reasonable. I made a mistake, but we can work through this." "Can we work through this, Nessa? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning to use me as your personal bank account while you continue your affair." "That's not true." I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshot folder. "Really? Because your text messages tell a different story." Her face went pale as she recognized her own words on my screen. "You went through my phone?" "I did. Fascinating reading, especially the parts where you and Brady discuss how clueless I am and how easy it'll be to keep me paying for everything." Nessa sank onto the edge of the bed, her public relations training finally failing her. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to understand something very clearly. I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your convenient solution to an inconvenient problem. So, what happens now? Now you figure out how to pay your own bills." My phone rang before she could respond. The caller ID showed our realtor's number. "Hi, Janet," I answered, making sure Nessa could hear every word. "Yes, the house is definitely going on the market. Today, if possible." "What?" Nessa lunged for the phone, but I stepped away. "The lockbox code? Sure, it's 2847. Yes, you can start showing it immediately." I ended the call and turned back to Nessa, who looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "You're selling the house?" "I'm selling my house. The house I paid for, that I hold the deed to, that you've never contributed a dime toward. This is my home, too." "Was your home." Past tense. Nessa's shock was transforming into rage. "You can't do this. I have rights." "Actually, you don't. I had my sister review the paperwork. Everything I'm doing is completely legal." "Your sister, the lawyer?" "Of course you involved Martha." "I involved a legal professional, yes. Unlike you, I believe in getting expert advice before making life-changing decisions." Nessa stood up, pacing the bedroom like a caged animal. "This is insane, Tanner. You're destroying our life over one mistake." "One mistake? Nessa, you've been sleeping with my brother for 3 months. You got pregnant by him. You tried to blackmail me into raising his child. Exactly which part of that qualifies as one mistake?" "Fine, I messed up. But we can fix this." "No, we can't. Because I don't want to fix this. I want you gone." The words hung in the air between us, final and irreversible. Nessa stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm the guy who's tired of being taken advantage of. I'm the guy who's done being your convenient solution to every problem you create." My phone buzzed with a text from Janet, the realtor. First showing scheduled for 2 p.m. today. House should move fast in this market. I showed Nessa the message. You might want to start packing. She left for work without another word, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. I waited until her car disappeared down the street, then called my office to let them know I'd be working from home for the next few days. Eddie Martinez, my business partner and closest friend, answered on the first ring. Tanner? You sound terrible. What's going on? Nessa's been cheating on me with Brady. She's pregnant with his baby and tried to blackmail me into paying for everything. Jesus, are you okay? I'm better than okay. I'm free, but I need a favor. Name it. Remember that social media monitoring software we developed for the Henderson account? I need you to run a search on Nessa's online activity. All platforms, all accounts, everything. That's legally questionable, Tanner. She's been posting about our private life without my consent. I just need to know what she's been saying. Eddie was quiet for a moment. Give me an hour. While I waited, I went through the house methodically, separating my belongings from Nessa's. Everything I'd paid for went into one pile. Everything that was clearly hers went into another. The shared items presented a problem, but I decided to be generous. She could have the furniture, the decorations, the kitchen appliances. I only wanted my electronics, my books, and my personal items. My phone rang as I was boxing up my computer equipment. Tanner, you need to see this. Eddie's voice was grim. I'm sending you a link to a private Instagram account. Username is Nessa Knows Best. I opened the link on my laptop. The account was set to private, but Eddie had managed to capture screenshots of the recent posts. What I saw made my stomach turn. Nessa had been documenting our relationship like a reality show, posting photos of our home, our vacations, our private moments. But the captions told a different story than the images suggested. Another boring dinner with the boyfriend, read one caption under a photo of us at a nice restaurant. At least he pays for everything. Tanner's working late again, said another, posted over a picture of me at my computer. More time for me to have actual fun. The worst was a recent post showing our engagement photo. The caption read, "When you're engaged to a wallet with legs. Some girls marry for love, smart girls marry for security." The comments from her friends were even more revealing. They knew about Brady. They knew about the pregnancy. They'd been encouraging her to keep the boring one for the bills and the fun one for everything else. I screenshotted everything, adding it to my growing evidence file. Then I called Eddie back. Can you trace when these posts started? Already did. First one was about 6 months ago, right around the time the Brady messages begin. So she's been planning this for months. Looks that way. Tanner, there's something else. I found a GoFundMe account. A what? She started a crowdfunding campaign 3 days ago. Help Nessa start her new life as a single mom. She's telling people you abandoned her when you found out she was pregnant. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd started fundraising off our breakup before we'd even officially broken up. How much has she raised? About $800 so far, but it's gaining traction on social media. Send me everything. Screenshots, links, timestamps, all of it. Already in your email. Tanner, what are you planning? I'm planning to make sure the truth comes out. That afternoon, I drove to Brady's apartment complex. The Riverside Gardens was a new development on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that attracted young professionals with more style than substance. Brady's unit was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the pool where he spent most of his free time showing off for college girls. I didn't knock. Instead, I sat in my car and waited. Brady's routine was predictable. Gym in the morning, clients in the afternoon, bar with his friends in the evening. He'd be leaving for the gym soon. Sure enough, Brady emerged at 3:30, carrying his oversized gym bag and wearing the kind of tank top that showed off his tattoos. He looked exactly like what he was, a 32-year-old man still trying to live like he was 22. I waited until he drove away, then walked to the building's management office. Hi, I said to the young woman behind the desk. I'm Brady Jossman's brother. He asked me to drop off his rent check. She looked confused. Mr. Jossman's rent is automatically deducted from his account. Really? He told me he was having problems with his bank. Let me check his account. She typed for a moment, then frowned. Actually, his payment was declined this month. He's 3 days late. Oh no. He's going to be so embarrassed. He's been having financial troubles but didn't want to ask the family for help. If he doesn't pay by Friday, we'll have to start eviction proceedings. I'll make sure he knows. Thank you so much. I left the office with a smile. Brady's financial situation was apparently as unstable as his moral character. That evening, I went to Murphy's Tavern, the local dive bar where Brady and his friends gathered most nights. The place was exactly what you'd expect: dim lighting, sticky floors, and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged bad decisions. Brady was holding court at a corner table, regaling his usual crowd with some story that involved lots of gesturing and fake laughter. I ordered a beer and found a spot at the bar where I could watch without being noticed. Tanner? I turned to find Mrs. Hargrove's grandson, Danny, sliding onto the bar stool next to me. Danny was about my age, worked construction, and had always been friendly when we'd run into each other around the neighborhood. Danny, how are you? Better than you, I'm guessing. Grandma told me about the photos. Your grandmother has been very helpful. She likes you, says you're the only decent guy on the street. He glanced toward Brady's table. She also says your brother's been bragging about his conquest. Bragging? Real loud, real public. Been telling anyone who will listen about how he stole your girl, making jokes about you raising his kid. The cold feeling in my chest intensified. Is that so? Danny nodded toward Brady's table. He's been at it for weeks, making you sound like a complete fool. I finished my beer and stood up. Thanks for the heads up, Danny. Where are you going? To have a conversation with my brother. I walked over to Brady's table, arriving just as he was launching into another story. So there I am in Tanner's own bed and... He looked up and saw me standing there. Tanner, what are you doing here? His friends shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware they'd been caught gossiping. I came to congratulate you, I said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Congratulate me? On the baby. Nessa told me you're the father. I wanted to shake your hand. The table went silent. Brady's face cycled through several expressions before settling on panic. Tanner, let me explain. No explanation needed. I think it's wonderful that you're finally going to take responsibility for something. It's not that simple. Sure it is. You got my fiancée pregnant. Now you get to pay for it. Brady stood up, probably hoping his height advantage would intimidate me. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. You've been sleeping with Nessa for months. She's pregnant with your baby. And now you're both expecting me to pay for your mistakes. The entire bar was listening now. Brady's friends looked mortified, and several other patrons had turned to watch the show. That's not how it happened, Brady said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Because Nessa seems pretty sure about the paternity. She even prepared a budget for me to cover all the expenses. A budget? Oh yes, very thorough. Medical bills, child support, living expenses. She had it all itemized. Brady's face was turning red. I didn't know about any budget. Of course you didn't, because you never intended to pay for anything, did you? You just wanted to have your fun and let your responsible older brother clean up the mess. Tanner, you're making a scene. Am I? Because from what I hear, you've been making scenes in here for weeks, bragging about your conquest, making jokes about me raising your child. Brady glanced around the bar, realizing how this looked to everyone watching. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Brady? Help me understand how sleeping with your brother's fiancée and getting her pregnant is somehow my responsibility. He didn't have an answer. None of his usual charm or smooth talking could explain away what he'd done. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to stop bragging about destroying my relationship. You're going to stop making jokes about me, and you're going to start figuring out how to support your own child. And if I don't? I smiled, and something in my expression made Brady take a step back. Then you'll find out exactly how creative I can get when someone tries to make me look like a fool. I turned and walked away, leaving Brady standing there with his mouth open and his friends staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Outside the bar, my phone buzzed with a text from Nessa. "We need to talk," the realtor called. I typed back, "Nothing to discuss. You have until Friday to find somewhere else to live." "Tanner, please, let's be adults about this." I am being an adult. Adults pay their own bills and deal with the consequences of their actions. I'll fight you on the house. With what lawyer? You can't even afford your loan payments. The typing indicator showed she was composing a response, then disappeared. A moment later, my phone rang. "Tanner, I'm sorry." Her voice was shaky, desperate. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this." "No, Nessa, we can't fix this because I don't want to fix this." "What do you want? Money? I'll pay you back for everything." "I want you to understand something. For 3 months, you've been treating me like I'm stupid, like I'm some pathetic fool who would never figure out what you were doing. I never thought you were stupid. Your Instagram posts suggest otherwise." Silence on the other end of the line. "Oh yes, I found your little social media diary. Very entertaining reading, especially the part about marrying a wallet with legs." "Tanner, I can explain." "And the GoFundMe campaign? Really, Nessa? Crowdfunding your affair? How did you—" "I'm an IT specialist. Finding information is what I do for a living. Please, just listen to me for 1 minute. I've listened to you for 2 years, Nessa. I've listened to your excuses, your promises, your explanations for why nothing is ever your fault. I'm done listening. So what happens now? Now you figure out how to be an adult. You pay your own bills, you deal with your own problems, and you leave me alone. And Brady? Brady can figure out how to be an adult too. Amazing concept, I know." I ended the call and drove home to find a lockbox attached to the front door and a realtor's sign in the yard. Janet had worked fast. Inside, the house felt different already. Lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. I spent the evening packing my remaining belongings and researching short-term rental properties. My phone stayed quiet until almost midnight, when a text arrived from an unknown number. "This isn't over." I screenshotted the message and added it to my evidence file. Then I typed back, "You're right, it's just getting started." The town fundraiser for the new library was exactly the kind of event Nessa lived for, a chance to network, be seen, and manage her public image. She'd been planning her outfit for weeks, back when she thought we'd be attending together as the perfect engaged couple. I almost didn't go. The smart play would have been to stay home and avoid the drama. But something about the idea of Nessa controlling the narrative, playing the victim to our entire social circle, bothered me more than it should have. So I put on my best suit and drove to the Maple Hollow Community Center, arriving fashionably late to find the event in full swing. The community center had been transformed into an elegant party space, complete with white tablecloths, string lights, and a jazz quartet in the corner. Local business leaders mingled with town officials, everyone dressed to impress and eager to be seen supporting a good cause. I spotted Nessa immediately. She was holding court near the silent auction tables, wearing a flowing blue dress that cleverly disguised her early pregnancy. A small crowd of women surrounded her, their expressions sympathetic and supportive. "Tanner," Mayor Richardson approached with his usual politician's smile. "Good to see you. How are you holding up?" "Holding up?" "Nessa mentioned you've been having some relationship difficulties. These things happen, of course, but it's important to put the children first." I smiled politely. "Absolutely. Children should definitely know who their real fathers are." The mayor's expression flickered with confusion, but before he could respond, Tiffany Chen appeared at my elbow. "Tanner, we need to talk." Tiffany was Nessa's closest friend and biggest enabler, a woman who thrived on drama and gossip. What you're doing to Nessa is completely unfair. What am I doing to Nessa? Don't play innocent. Abandoning her when she needs you most? Selling the house out from under her? She's pregnant, for crying out loud. She's pregnant with my brother's baby, Tiffany. Slight difference. Tiffany's face went pale. What are you talking about? Has Nessa not mentioned that part? The part where she's been sleeping with Brady for 3 months? That's not... She wouldn't... I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the text message screenshots. Tiffany's eyes widened as she read, "Oh my God. Indeed. So when you say I'm abandoning her, what you really mean is that I'm refusing to pay for her affair." Tiffany stared at the phone screen, then at me, then across the room at Nessa. She told everyone you were just being vindictive about a small mistake. A small mistake. Interesting way to describe a 3-month affair that resulted in pregnancy. I need a drink, Tiffany muttered, walking away in a daze. I made my way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with neighbors and acquaintances. Most people seemed unaware of the drama, treating me with their usual friendly indifference. But a few had obviously heard Nessa's version of events and regarded me with barely concealed disapproval. Tanner Jossman, you should be ashamed of yourself. I turned to find Mrs. Peterson, the town's self-appointed moral authority, glaring at me with righteous indignation. Should I? Abandoning your pregnant fiancé? In my day, men took responsibility for their actions. In your day, Mrs. Peterson, did women take responsibility for theirs? What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe you should get all the facts before passing judgment. Mrs. Peterson huffed and walked away, but not before I noticed several people nearby listening to our exchange. The evening continued with similar encounters. Nessa had clearly been busy spreading her version of the story, casting herself as the wronged woman and me as the heartless abandoner. What she hadn't counted on was my willingness to correct the record. By the time dinner was served, word was spreading through the crowd like wildfire. I watched people whispering to each other, glancing between Nessa and me with growing confusion and curiosity. The breaking point came during the speeches. Nessa had somehow arranged to speak about the importance of community support for struggling families. She stood at the podium in her blue dress, looking beautiful and vulnerable, delivering a heartfelt plea for compassion and understanding. Sometimes life throws us challenges we never expected, she said, her voice carrying just the right amount of emotion. Sometimes the people we trust most let us down when we need them most. But that's when community becomes family, when neighbors become the support system we thought we had at home. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Several women dabbed at their eyes with napkins. I'm facing one of those challenges now, Nessa continued. As a single mother-to-be, I'm learning to navigate a world that can be harsh and unforgiving to women in my situation. Single mother-to-be. She was actually doing it, playing the victim card in front of the entire town. But I have faith that good people will do the right thing, that fathers will step up and take responsibility for their children even when it's difficult. That was my cue. I stood up from my table and began walking toward the podium. Conversation stopped as people noticed my movement. Nessa saw me coming and her confident expression faltered. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I think there might be some confusion about the situation." Nessa gripped the podium. "Tanner, this isn't the time. Actually, this seems like the perfect time. Since you're asking fathers to step up and take responsibility, I brought something that might help with that." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a paternity test kit, holding it up for everyone to see. This is a simple DNA test. Takes about 5 minutes to complete, results in 48 hours. Since you're so concerned about fathers taking responsibility, I thought we could clear up any confusion about paternity right now. The room went completely silent. Nessa stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Of course," I continued. "We'll need a sample from the actual father, too. Brady, are you here tonight?" I scanned the crowd and spotted my brother near the bar, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Brady, come on up. Let's settle this once and for all." "Tanner, stop," Nessa hissed into the microphone. "Stop what? Stop trying to establish paternity? I thought that's what you wanted. Responsible fathers taking care of their children." Brady was pushing through the crowd, probably hoping to escape, but the room was too packed for a quick exit. "Brady Jossman," I announced to the room. "My brother, also the father of Nessa's baby." The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Nessa's face had gone from pale to bright red. "That's not true," she said into the microphone, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Because your text messages suggest otherwise." I pulled out my phone. "Should I read some of them? I have screenshots." "You can't do this," Nessa whispered. "Can't do what? Tell the truth?" Brady had finally made his way to the front of the room, looking like a man facing execution. "Brady," I said cheerfully, "Nessa was just talking about the importance of fathers taking responsibility. Care to comment?" "Tanner, don't do this here." "Why not here?" "Nessa chose to make this public. She chose to lie to everyone about what really happened. I'm just providing some clarity." Mayor Richardson stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding at his fundraiser. Perhaps this discussion would be better held in private. "Oh, I think the community has a right to know," I replied, "especially since Nessa started a GoFundMe campaign asking for money based on her version of events." More gasps from the crowd. Someone in the back shouted, "What GoFundMe?" "Nessa knows best," I called out. "Check it out. Very touching story about how I abandoned my pregnant fiancée, except she forgot to mention that the baby isn't mine." Nessa finally found her voice. "Stop it, Tanner. Just stop. Stop telling the truth. Stop defending myself against your lies. I never lied about anything important. You've been lying for months, Nessa. To me, to your friends, to everyone in this room." I turned to address the crowd directly. 3 months ago, my fiancée started an affair with my brother. Last week, she told me she was pregnant and demanded that I pay for everything while she continued her relationship with Brady. When I refused, she started telling people I'd abandoned her. The room was quiet, except for the sound of phones buzzing as people started texting and posting about the drama. "So, yes," I continued, "I'm selling the house. Yes, I'm withdrawing my financial support. And yes, I'm ending our relationship, because I refuse to pay for someone else's affair." Nessa was crying now, but they looked more like tears of rage than sadness. "You're destroying my life," she said into the microphone. "I'm not destroying anything, Nessa. I'm just refusing to clean up your mess." I turned and walked out of the community center, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and buzzing conversations. Outside, the cool evening air felt refreshing after the stifling atmosphere inside. My phone was already lighting up with text messages from people who'd witnessed the scene. Danny Hargrove. "Dude, that was epic." Eddie Martinez. "Please tell me someone got video of that." Martha Jossman. "Call me. Now." I was about to call Martha when Tiffany Chen burst through the community center doors, looking frantic. "Tanner, wait." I turned to face her. "What do you want, Tiffany? Is it true? All of it? Which part? The affair? The pregnancy? Brady being the father?" "All true. I have documentation if you'd like to see it." Tiffany stared at me for a long moment. "She's my best friend. And she's been lying to you for months. I feel like such an idiot. All those times she complained about you being distant and distracted. She said you were probably cheating on her. Projection is a common defense mechanism. What happens now? Now Nessa and Brady figure out how to be adults, and you decide whether you want to keep enabling her lies or start demanding some honesty from your friends." Tiffany nodded slowly. "She asked me to let her stay at my place. That's your choice. But if you do, make sure you hide your valuables and check your credit report regularly." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means Nessa has $60,000 in debt and no way to pay it. People in desperate situations sometimes make desperate choices. Tiffany's eyes widened. She wouldn't she? 3 months ago, would you have believed she'd cheat on me with my own brother? I left Tiffany standing in the parking lot and drove home to find Brady's truck in my driveway. He was sitting on the front steps, head in his hands. "Get off my property," I said as I got out of my car. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Tanner, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "You never meant to get caught, you mean?" Brady stood up, and for a moment I thought he might try to fight me, but something in my expression must have warned him off. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I want you to disappear. I want you to take responsibility for your own mess, and I want you to never contact me again." "She's not my responsibility. She's pregnant with your baby, Brady. That makes her exactly your responsibility. I can't afford a kid." "Then you should have thought of that before sleeping with my fiancée." Brady kicked at the gravel in my driveway. "This is all her fault. She seduced me." "She seduced you? You're 32 years old, Brady. You're not a victim here." "She told me you guys were having problems. She said you were probably going to break up anyway." "And you believed that justified sleeping with her?" I don't know what I thought. You thought you could have your fun, and I'd clean up the mess, just like always." Brady looked up at me with something resembling surprise. "Just like always?" Every stupid decision you've ever made, every consequence you've ever faced, someone else has bailed you out. Mom, Dad, me. Well, congratulations, Brady. You finally found a problem that's too big for anyone else to solve. So what am I supposed to do? Get a job that pays more than minimum wage. Find an apartment you can actually afford. Start acting like the adult you're supposed to be. And if I can't? I shrugged. Then you'll learn what consequences feel like. Brady stared at me for a long moment, probably waiting for me to offer some kind of help or solution. When it became clear that wasn't happening, he walked to his truck and drove away without another word. Inside the house, I poured myself a glass of wine and checked my email. 3 more showings had been scheduled for the weekend, and Janet thought we might have an offer by Monday. My phone rang as I was reviewing the latest loan default notices that had been forwarded to my email. "Tanner, what the hell were you thinking?" Martha's voice was sharp with disapproval. "I was thinking it was time to stop letting Nessa control the narrative. By humiliating her in front of the entire town? By telling the truth in front of the entire town. There's a difference between defending yourself and going nuclear. She started a crowdfunding campaign, Martha. She was literally profiting off her lies about me. So you decided to destroy her reputation? I decided to stop protecting someone who was actively trying to destroy mine." Martha was quiet for a moment. "What's your endgame here, Tanner?" "My endgame is getting Nessa and Brady out of my life permanently." "And you think public humiliation is the way to do that?" "I think consequences are the way to do that." "Be careful, Tanner. Desperate people do desperate things. Let them. I'm done being afraid of what Nessa might do if I don't give her what she wants." After I hung up with Martha, I spent an hour going through the social media monitoring reports Eddie had sent. The fundraiser incident was already spreading online, with multiple people posting their own versions of what had happened. Most of the posts were sympathetic to me, expressing shock at Nessa's behavior and admiration for my public confrontation. But a few were critical, calling me vindictive and cruel for embarrassing a pregnant woman. I was particularly interested in Nessa's response. She'd posted a long emotional message on her Instagram account, claiming I'd ambushed her at a public event and calling my behavior abusive and controlling. The comments on her post were mixed. Some friends offered support and sympathy, but others were asking pointed questions about the affair allegations. "Is it true about Brady?" one comment read. "Why didn't you mention the baby wasn't Tanner's?" asked another. "Girl, you need to get your story straight," wrote a third. Nessa was losing control of the narrative and she knew it. which meant she'd probably escalate her tactics. I was right. At 2 in the morning, my phone started ringing. Nessa's number appeared on the screen over and over, but I let every call go to voicemail. After the 10th call, I turned off the phone and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed and my mailbox knocked over. A note was stuck under my windshield wiper. "This is what you get for ruining my life." I took photos of everything and added them to my evidence file. Then I called the police to file a vandalism report. Officer Williams arrived within an hour, a middle-aged cop who'd been working in Maple Hollow for 20 years. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked, examining the scratches on my car. "I have a pretty good idea." "Want to share?" I told him about the breakup, the affair, and the scene at the fundraiser. Officer Williams listened without comment, taking notes in his small notebook. "You think your ex-fiancée did this?" "I think someone connected to her did this." "Any proof?" I showed him the note. "The handwriting looks familiar." Officer Williams bagged the note as evidence. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, you might want to consider installing security cameras." "Already ordered them." After the police left, I spent the morning getting repair estimates for my car. The damage would cost about $800 to fix, money I could afford but shouldn't have to spend. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life. Now I'm going to destroy yours." I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Officer Williams. Then I called my insurance company to add extra coverage to my policy. If Nessa wanted to escalate this into a war, I was prepared to fight back. The security cameras I'd installed caught everything in perfect high-definition detail. At 3:17 a.m. on Thursday morning, Brady's truck pulled into my driveway with the headlights off. He sat there for almost 5 minutes, probably working up the courage for whatever he'd planned. Then he got out, walked to my front door, and started pounding on it like he was trying to break it down. I was already awake, having learned to sleep lightly since the vandalism incident. From my bedroom window, I could see Brady on the front porch, swaying slightly in a way that suggested he'd been drinking. "Tanner!" he shouted, loud enough to wake the neighbors. "Get out here! We need to settle this!" I checked my phone. The security system was recording everything, automatically uploading to cloud storage. Whatever happened next, I'd have evidence. "Tanner, you coward! Face me like a man!" More pounding on the door. I heard Mrs. Hargrove's porch light come on next door, followed by her front door opening. "Brady Jossman, you stop that racket right now," she called out. "Some of us are trying to sleep." "Mind your own business, old lady." That was a mistake. Mrs. Hargrove had lived in this neighborhood longer than Brady had been alive, and she commanded a certain respect among the residents. "Don't you dare speak to me that way, you little punk. I'm calling the police." "Call whoever you want. This is between me and my brother." I decided it was time to make an appearance. I opened the front door, but kept the security chain attached, creating a gap just wide enough to speak through. "What do you want, Brady?" He spun around, nearly losing his balance. Up close, I could smell the alcohol on his breath and see the desperation in his eyes. "You ruined everything," he slurred. "My apartment, my reputation, my relationship with Nessa." "You ruined those things yourself." "No, you did this. You turned everyone against me." I told people the truth. If that turned them against you, maybe you should examine your behavior. Brady stepped closer to the door and I noticed his hands were clenched into fists. "Open this door, Tanner." "Not happening." "Open it or I'll break it down." "Go ahead and try. The police are already on their way and everything you're doing is being recorded." Brady looked around and noticed the cameras for the first time. His face went through several expressions before settling on rage. "You're recording me?" "I'm recording someone who's trespassing on my property and threatening me." "I'm not threatening you." "You just said you'd break down my door." Brady seemed to realize how his words sounded. "I just want to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "Nessa's a mess, Tanner. She's been crying for days. She can't eat, can't sleep. That's not my problem. She's pregnant with my baby. That makes it my problem. Finally, some acknowledgement of responsibility. How refreshing. Don't be sarcastic with me. Then don't be stupid with me. You got her pregnant, Brady. You deal with the consequences. I can't afford a baby. Then you shouldn't have risked creating one. Brady's frustration was building toward something that looked dangerous. I kept my hand on my phone, ready to call 911 if he actually tried to break down the door. This is all your fault, he said again. How is your affair my fault? You were never good enough for her anyway. She told me she was bored with you. And yet she expected me to pay all her bills. She deserves better than you. Then it's lucky she has you now, isn't it? Brady stared at me through the gap in the door, his alcohol-clouded brain trying to process the situation. I'm going to make you pay for this, he said finally. Are you threatening me, Brady? I'm promising you. The sound of sirens in the distance seemed to snap him back to reality. Brady looked around frantically, probably realizing that being arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct wouldn't help his already precarious situation. This isn't over, he said, backing toward his truck. Yes, it is. Brady drove away just as the police car turned onto our street. Officer Williams got out and walked to my front door, notebook already in hand. Mr. Jossman, we got a call about a disturbance. I opened the door fully and stepped outside. My brother was here, drunk and making threats. Is he gone now? Just left. Blue Ford pickup, license plate. I rattled off Brady's plate number from memory. We'll see if we can catch up with him. Drinking and driving is a serious offense. I showed Officer Williams the security footage on my phone. The audio was clear enough to hear every word of Brady's threats. I'll need a copy of that video, he said, after watching it. I'll email it to you. Any idea what prompted this visit? Guilt, probably, or pressure from Nessa. Officer Williams made notes in his book. The ex-fiancée from the vandalism report? The same. Mr. Jossman, I'm going to be direct with you. This situation seems to be escalating. Have you considered getting a restraining order? I've been hoping they'd just move on with their lives. Sometimes people need legal encouragement to do that. After the police left, I couldn't get back to sleep. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise and thinking about Officer Williams's suggestion. A restraining order would make this whole mess more official, more legal. It would create a paper trail that could follow Brady and Nessa for years. Part of me liked that idea. But another part of me worried about escalation. Desperate people did desperate things, and Nessa was becoming more desperate by the day. My phone buzzed with a text from Eddie. Dude, check social media. Nessa's having a complete meltdown. I opened Instagram to find that Nessa had posted a live video at 4 a.m., apparently filmed in her car outside a 24-hour diner. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, makeup smeared, eyes red from crying. I can't take this anymore, she was saying to the camera. Tanner has completely destroyed my life. He's turned everyone against me, taken away my home, ruined my reputation. I don't know what I'm going to do. The video had been up for 3 hours and already had dozens of comments. Most were supportive, offering sympathy and encouragement, but a few were more skeptical. Girl, you cheated on him with his own brother, one comment read. What did you expect? Maybe take some responsibility for your own actions, suggested another. Nessa had responded to the critical comments with increasing hostility, calling people judgmental and heartless. The thread was turning into a flame war, with her supporters and critics arguing back and forth. I screenshotted everything and added it to my evidence file. Then I called Martha. It's 6 a.m, Tanner. Brady showed up drunk at 3 a.m. making threats. Nessa's having a public breakdown on social media. I think it's time for that restraining order. Martha was quiet for a moment. What kind of threats? Promising to make me pay, saying this isn't over, all recorded on my security cameras. Send me the video and screenshots of any threatening messages. Already compiled. I'll file the paperwork today. In the meantime, avoid any contact with either of them. That's the plan. I spent the morning working from home, trying to focus on client projects while keeping one eye on social media. Nessa's meltdown was spreading beyond her personal accounts, with local Facebook groups and neighborhood forums picking up the story. The general consensus seemed to be that while my public confrontation at the fundraiser had been harsh, Nessa's behavior was inexcusable. Several people shared their own stories of her entitled attitude and manipulative behavior over the years. Always knew there was something off about that girl, wrote one neighbor. She tried to get me to cover her bar tab last month, claiming she'd forgotten her wallet, posted another. My husband did some work on their house last year. She kept trying to get him to do extra stuff for free, saying Tanner would make it worth his while later, shared a third. A pattern was emerging of someone who'd been taking advantage of people for years, using charm and manipulation to get what she wanted. Around noon, Tiffany Chen called me. Tanner, I need to apologize. For what? For not seeing what Nessa really was, for enabling her behavior, for believing her lies about you. Apology accepted. She's been staying at my place since the fundraiser incident. I asked her to leave this morning. What happened? I caught her going through my mail, looking for financial information. When I confronted her, she said she was just trying to understand my situation in case she needed to borrow money. She was planning to ask you for a loan? More than that, she'd already filled out a credit card application using my address and some of my personal information. I sat up straighter. That's identity theft, Tiffany. I know. I stopped her before she could submit it, but... Tiffany's voice trailed off. But what? I think she might have already done this to other people. What makes you say that? She had a folder full of personal information, names, addresses, social security numbers, bank account details. Some of it looked like stuff she could have gotten from her job in PR, but some of it looked more personal. Do you still have this folder? She took it with her when I kicked her out, but I took photos of some of the pages. Can you send them to me? Is that legal? If she's committing identity theft, then yes, documenting evidence is not only legal but necessary. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a series of photos from Tiffany. The images showed handwritten lists of personal information for at least a dozen people, including several names I recognized from our social circle. Mrs. Peterson from the library fundraiser was on the list, along with her social security number and bank account information. So was Danny Hargrove, my neighbor's grandson. Even Brady was included, which suggested Nessa had been planning to victimize him too. I forwarded everything to Martha and Officer Williams, then called the non-emergency police line to report suspected identity theft. We'll need the victims to file individual reports, the desk sergeant explained. But if you have evidence of a pattern, that helps establish intent. I spent the afternoon calling people on Nessa's list, warning them to check their credit reports and monitor their accounts. The reactions ranged from shock to anger to gratitude. I knew I should have trusted my instincts about that girl, Mrs. Peterson said when I called her. She was always asking too many personal questions. Danny Hargrove was more direct. If she stole my identity, I'll press charges so fast her head will spin. By evening, I had statements from 8 potential victims and promises that they'd file police reports the next day. My phone rang as I was finishing dinner. Mr. Jossman, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Maple Hollow Police Department. I understand you've been having some trouble with your ex-fiancée. That's an understatement. I've reviewed the reports Officer Williams filed, and I've seen the evidence you provided today. We'd like to bring Ms. Jossman in for questioning regarding the identity theft allegations. Good. There's just one problem. We can't locate her. She's not at her friend's house, not at her workplace, and not at any of her known associates. Do you have any idea where she might be? I thought about it. Try the Riverside Motel. That's where she used to meet my brother. We'll check it out. In the meantime, If she contacts you, don't engage. Just call us immediately. Understood. After I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. Nessa's desperation had finally pushed her into actual criminal behavior, which meant she'd face real consequences for the first time in her life. But it also meant she had nothing left to lose. My security system chimed at 11 p.m., indicating motion in the driveway. I checked the camera feed and saw a figure in dark clothing approaching the house on foot. It wasn't Brady this time. It was Nessa. She moved carefully, staying in the shadows, clearly trying to avoid the cameras. But my system had night vision and motion tracking. Every step was being recorded. She made her way to the side of the house where the electrical panel was located. I watched in disbelief as she opened the panel and started flipping breakers. The house went dark. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering my address and situation to the dispatcher. Then I crept to the front window and peered out. Nessa was trying to break into my car, probably planning to steal it or vandalize it further. She'd brought tools, a crowbar and what looked like a glass punch. The sound of sirens in the distance made her freeze. She looked around frantically, then ran toward the street where a car was waiting with its engine running. Brady was behind the wheel. They sped away just as the police cars turned onto my street, leaving me standing in my dark house with a damaged electrical panel and more evidence of their escalating desperation. Detective Martinez arrived with the patrol officers, surveying the damage with professional interest. "They're working together now," she observed. "Apparently. This is good for us. Conspiracy charges carry heavier penalties than individual crimes." "How long before you catch them?" "Not long. They're making mistakes, acting emotionally instead of thinking clearly. People like that always get caught." She was right. By morning, Brady and Nessa were in custody, arrested at a motel 2 towns over after Brady tried to use a stolen credit card to pay for their room. The credit card belonged to Mrs. Peterson. The Maple Hollow Police Department's interview room smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Through the one-way glass, I watched Nessa sitting at a metal table, her hands cuffed to a chain around her waist. She looked nothing like the polished PR professional who'd tried to manipulate me into funding her affair just 2 weeks ago. Detective Martinez sat beside me, reviewing the case file that had grown thick with evidence of escalating crimes. Identity theft, credit card fraud, breaking and entering, vandalism, conspiracy, she read from the list. "Your ex-fiancée has been busy." "What about Brady?" "Same charges, plus drunk driving from the other night. He's in the next room, already asking for a lawyer." "And Nessa?" "Still insisting she's the victim here. Claims you drove her to desperate measures by destroying her life." I watched Nessa through the glass as she fidgeted with her restraints. Even now, even facing felony charges, she maintained the posture of someone who'd been wronged rather than someone who'd made terrible choices. "She wants to talk to you," Detective Martinez said. "Why would I want to talk to her?" "You wouldn't, but it might help our case if she admits to more crimes while trying to justify her behavior." "You want me to wear a wire?" "Nothing that dramatic, just a conversation in a monitored room with cameras recording everything." I considered the offer. Part of me wanted to never see Nessa again, to let the justice system handle her while I moved on with my life. But another part of me was curious about what she'd say when cornered with nowhere left to run. 5 minutes, I said. That's all we need. The interview room was smaller than it looked from behind the glass. Nessa looked up when I entered, her eyes red from crying but still holding that familiar spark of manipulation. "Tanner, thank God. You have to help me." I sat down across from her, keeping my expression neutral. "Help you what?" "Get out of here. This is all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." "I was desperate, Tanner. You took away everything I had. My home, my security, my future. What was I supposed to do? Get a job, pay your own bills, take responsibility for your choices. You made that impossible. You turned everyone against me. I told people the truth, Nessa. If that turned them against you, maybe the problem isn't with them. She leaned forward, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she'd perfected over years in public relations. We can fix this. Drop the charges. Let me explain to people what really happened. We can go back to the way things were. The way things were? You mean with you cheating on me with my brother while I paid all your bills? That was a mistake. I was confused, emotional about our relationship problems. What relationship problems? You were always working, always distracted. I felt neglected. So, you decided to sleep with Brady. It just happened. For 3 months. I was going to end it. When? After you'd squeezed every dollar out of me that you could? Nessa's mask slipped slightly, revealing the calculating person underneath. You owe me, Tanner. I gave you 2 years of my life. You gave me 2 years of lies, manipulation, and financial exploitation. I loved you. You loved my bank account. That's not true. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of her Instagram post about marrying a wallet with legs. Your own words, Nessa. She stared at the screen, probably trying to think of a way to explain away her own documented thoughts. I was just venting to my friends. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're frustrated. You started a GoFundMe campaign claiming I'd abandoned you, when you knew the baby wasn't mine. I needed money for medical expenses. You needed money because you'd spent years living beyond your means while I covered the difference. So what happens now? You just let them destroy my life? I'm not letting them do anything. You destroyed your own life by committing multiple felonies. Because you drove me to it. I drove you to steal people's identities? I forced you to break into my house? You took away all my options. I took away your free ride. There's a difference. Nessa sat back in her chair, finally seeming to understand that I wasn't going to rescue her. You've changed, Tanner. You used to be kind. I used to be naive. This isn't who you really are. This is exactly who I really am. You just never bothered to look beneath the surface. So what do you want? Revenge? I want justice. I want consequences. I want you to finally face the results of your own choices without someone else cleaning up your mess. And Brady? Brady can figure out how to be an adult for the first time in his life. What about the baby? What about it? It's still your nephew or niece. It's the child of 2 people who made terrible decisions. That's not my responsibility. Nessa stared at me for a long moment, probably realizing that all her usual manipulation tactics were useless. I hate you, she said finally. I know. I hope you're miserable for the rest of your life. I'm sure you do. No one will ever love you the way I did. Good, because the way you loved me was selfish, dishonest, and ultimately destructive. I stood to leave, but Nessa called out one more time. Tanner, please. I'm pregnant. I can't go to prison. You should have thought of that before you started committing crimes. What about the baby? The baby will be better off without a mother who thinks identity theft is an acceptable solution to financial problems. I left Nessa sitting in the interview room and walked out of the police station into the bright afternoon sunshine. Detective Martinez followed me to the parking lot. That was helpful, she said. She admitted to several crimes while trying to justify them. What happens next? Arraignment tomorrow, then probably plea negotiations. With this much evidence, her lawyer will likely advise her to take whatever deal we offer. And Brady? Same process, though he's already trying to blame everything on her, claiming she manipulated him into helping. Sounds about right. Brady's never taken responsibility for anything in his life. Well, he's about to learn what consequences feel like. I drove home to find a sold sign in my front yard and a message from Janet the realtor. The house had closed that morning, 3 days ahead of schedule. The buyers were paying cash and wanted immediate possession. I had until the end of the week to move out, which was perfect timing. I'd already found a smaller place across town, a modern apartment with good security and no memories of Nessa. That evening, I sat in my empty living room, surrounded by boxes and packing materials, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "Saw the news about the arrests. How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Better than I've been in years." Any regrets? Only that I didn't see through her sooner. What's next? New apartment, fresh start, maybe a vacation. You've earned it. I had earned it. For the first time in years, I was free from Nessa's manipulation, Brady's entitlement, and the constant stress of enabling their bad decisions. The local newspaper ran a story about the arrests the next day, painting Nessa and Brady as a couple whose affair had spiraled into criminal behavior. The article mentioned the identity theft victims, the vandalism, the break-in attempt, and the conspiracy charges. Several people called to express their support and share their own stories about Nessa's manipulative behavior over the years. It seemed I wasn't the only person who'd been taken advantage of. She tried to get me to co-sign a loan for her last year, one acquaintance told me. Said it was just a formality and that you'd be making the payments anyway. She borrowed money from me 6 months ago for a family emergency, another friend revealed. Never paid it back, and now I know why. The pattern was clear. Nessa had been running scams on multiple people while using me as her primary financial safety net. A week later, both Nessa and Brady accepted plea deals rather than face trial. Nessa got 18 months in prison plus restitution to the identity theft victims. Brady got 12 months plus probation and community service. The local gossip mill had a field day with the sentencing, but I tried to stay above the drama. I'd gotten what I wanted: consequences for their actions and freedom from their chaos. My new apartment was everything I'd hoped for: quiet, secure, and completely mine. No shared bills, no joint accounts, no one else's problems to solve. I was unpacking books in my home office when my phone rang with an unknown number. "Tanner, this is Rebecca Chen, Tiffany's sister." I remembered Rebecca vaguely from a few social gatherings. She was younger than Tiffany, worked as a teacher, and had always seemed more grounded than her drama-loving sibling. "Hi, Rebecca. How can I help you?" "I wanted to thank you for warning people about Nessa's identity theft scheme. You probably saved a lot of people from financial damage." "I'm glad I could help. Also, I wanted to apologize for my sister. She realizes now how wrong she was to enable Nessa's behavior. Tiffany doesn't owe me an apology. She thinks she does. We all do, really. Nessa fooled a lot of people for a long time. She was very good at playing the victim. Too good. Anyway, I was wondering if you'd like to have coffee sometime. Not as a date or anything," she added quickly. "Just as friends. I think you could probably use some normal conversation with someone who isn't trying to manipulate you." I smiled at that. "Coffee sounds great." "Really?" "Really. It's been a while since I've had a conversation with someone who doesn't want anything from me." "Well, I do want one thing." "What's that?" "I want to hear the whole story from someone who was actually there. The rumors around town are getting pretty wild." "I think I can manage that." We made plans to meet at the Grind the next afternoon. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was looking forward to it, not because I was ready to date again, but because Rebecca represented something I'd almost forgotten existed: genuine, uncomplicated human connection. The next morning brought news that Nessa had been transferred to the county correctional facility to begin serving her sentence. Brady was already in the work release program, spending his days doing community service and his nights in a minimum security dormitory. I felt no satisfaction in their punishment, but I felt no sympathy either. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Hargrove. "Good riddance to bad rubbish. Neighborhood's quieter already. I smiled and typed back, "Thanks for all your help with the evidence gathering." "Any time, dear. That's what neighbors are for." That afternoon, I met Rebecca at the grind and spent 2 hours telling her the complete story of my relationship with Nessa, the discovery of the affair, and the aftermath. Rebecca listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't imagine living with that level of deception for so long," she said when I finished. "The scary part is how normal it felt at the time. The lies became so routine that I stopped noticing them." "What made you finally see through it?" "Catching her on that phone call with Brady. Once I knew what to look for, all the other lies became obvious." "Do you think she ever actually loved you?" I considered the question. "I think she loved the lifestyle I provided. The financial security, the social status, the safety net. But me as a person? No. I don't think she ever saw me as anything more than a means to an end." "That's incredibly sad." "For her, maybe. For me, it's liberating. I spent 2 years trying to make someone happy who was incapable of appreciating what she had. And now? Now I get to figure out what I actually want instead of what someone else expects me to provide." Rebecca smiled. "That sounds like a good problem to have. The best problem I've had in years." As I walked home from the coffee shop, I passed the community center where the library fundraiser had taken place just a month ago. The building looked the same, but I felt like a completely different person than the man who'd walked in there expecting to maintain a polite facade while his life fell apart. That man had been afraid of confrontation, afraid of making waves, afraid of standing up for himself. He'd been so focused on being the good guy that he'd forgotten being good to yourself was just as important as being good to others. I wasn't that man anymore. My phone rang as I reached my apartment building. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Hello? Tanner? This is Brady." I almost hung up immediately, but curiosity stopped me. "What do you want, Brady?" "I'm calling from the work release center. I wanted to apologize." "Okay. I know I messed up everything. The affair, the lies, the criminal stuff. I know I hurt you and I'm sorry." Apology noted. "I was hoping we could talk when I get out. Maybe try to rebuild our relationship." "There's no relationship to rebuild, Brady." "Come on, Tanner. We're brothers." "Brothers don't sleep with each other's fiancés." "I made a mistake." "You made a series of deliberate choices over several months." "I was confused about my feelings for Nessa." "Your feelings for Nessa are irrelevant. Your complete disregard for me is what ended our relationship." "So that's it? We're done forever?" "That's it." "What about family gatherings, holidays?" "What about them?" "Mom and Dad are going to expect us to work this out." "Mom and Dad can expect whatever they want. I'm not responsible for managing their expectations any more than I'm responsible for cleaning up your messes." "Tanner, please. I need my family right now." "You should have thought of that before you decided to betray your family." "I can't take back what I did, but I can try to make it right." "There's no making this right, Brady. Some things can't be fixed." "So you're just going to cut me out of your life completely?" "I already have." I hung up and blocked his number. Then I sat in my apartment, looking out at the view of downtown Maple Hollow, feeling something I'd never experienced before: complete control over my own life. No one was manipulating me, using me, or taking advantage of me. No one was creating problems for me to solve or messes for me to clean up. For the first time in years, my life belonged entirely to me. It was a good feeling. The story could have ended there, with justice served and lessons learned. But life rarely provides such clean conclusions. 2 months later, I was grocery shopping when I ran into Tiffany Chen in the produce section. She looked embarrassed to see me, probably still feeling guilty about her role in enabling Nessa's behavior. "Tanner, hi. How are you?" "Good. Really good." "I'm glad. I heard about your new apartment. And I saw you having coffee with my sister." Rebecca's great. Very different from her sister. Tiffany laughed nervously. Yeah, Rebecca got all the common sense in the family. How are you doing? Better. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I was so willing to enable Nessa's lies. And what have you learned? That I was so desperate to be needed that I ignored obvious red flags. Nessa made me feel important by sharing her secrets and asking for my help, even when her secrets were about hurting other people. That's very self-aware. The therapist says I have codependent tendencies. Apparently, I'm attracted to people who create drama because it makes me feel useful. Are you working on changing that? Every day. It's harder than I expected. We chatted for a few more minutes about neutral topics, then went our separate ways. As I loaded groceries into my car, I reflected on how much everyone's life had changed since the affair came to light. Nessa was in prison, learning what consequences felt like for the first time in her adult life. Brady was working community service and living in a halfway house, finally forced to support himself without family bailouts. Tiffany was in therapy, examining her own patterns of enabling destructive behavior. And me? I was free. Free from manipulation, free from other people's drama, free from the exhausting cycle of creating solutions to problems I hadn't created. I drove home to my quiet apartment, made dinner for one, and spent the evening reading a book I'd bought simply because it looked interesting. No one called with emergencies, no one needed money, no one expected me to solve their problems. It was perfect. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Coffee again tomorrow? I found a new place we should try. I smiled and typed back, sounds perfect. And it did sound perfect. Not because I was ready to jump into another relationship, but because Rebecca represented something I'd almost forgotten existed, the possibility of connecting with someone who saw me as a person rather than a solution to their problems. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow,